I'm an Android user. Always have been and probably always will be. About a few months ago, I was looking for a new laptop and eventually went down a rabbit hole that ended with me getting an iPad. That's something I never thought I would do. I needed something that I could do some light video editing on, write scripts when I'm out, and ideally draw on, so an iPad with a pencil and a keyboard was a perfect fit. Plus I got a great deal on it, so I couldn't really pass it up. To Apple's credit, they make the best tablets, and even though I'm Team Green, I have no problem admitting that. I got the Pro 11 Gen 2, so not an M series, but the performance is still really good. Basically, this was a grown-up tool I was getting for work and creativity, and playing games on it was the last thing on my mind. I have so many handhelds that playing on a tablet or a phone just doesn't really seem appealing. But like every device I own, at some point I have to start messing with it. So I loaded up some emulators, modded a G8 Galileo, and before I knew it, I was hooked. So in this video, I want to share with you my experience using an Android controller on an iPad, and share with you why I think this is an awesome combination. So the first thing I had to do was figure out what controller I was going to use, because I'm not a fan of using touch controls. My first thought was to grab an Xbox controller and use that, and that works especially because of how much support X input has, but that wasn't ideal since I like to lay on the couch or in bed when I'm playing on something that's supposed to be portable. If I have to set it up on a table and sit in front of it, I might as well just play on a PC. So I started looking at telescopic controllers. Newer iPads have USB-C ports, so that made it easier since I didn't want to use my iPad controller. But no one makes USB-C controllers for tablets, and that's seriously a shame. Luckily, MiniXPC sent me a G8 Galileo for review, and that can easily be modded to fit a tablet. Of course, they didn't know what I was going to do with it, and they haven't seen this video beforehand. Everything just kind of fell into place. Now Stubbs already reviewed this controller on the channel, but he did it using his Z Fold, which runs on Android, and thanks to Shem from RetroBreeze, I knew this controller could fit a huge tablet. But before I get into the experience and all of that, let me show you how to do that mod and get this working with a tablet. For the mod, we're going to need a pry tool, and make sure you grab a beefy one. We're going to need a box cutter or some clippers, a Phillips head screwdriver, and a heat gun or a blow dryer. Whatever you have handy is going to work. And don't worry, this mod doesn't affect the functionality in case you want to use it with a phone later on. To get things started, we need to take the covers off the right side of the controller, and this is just held on by magnets, so you just have to pull it up. Here we have a couple of screws that we need to remove. The tricky ones are under the rubber pad in the middle. The best way to access them is just to heat up the rubber so that the adhesive loosens up, and you only need to do it with the left half since the 3 screws that we need to remove are on that side. Now we need to take the pry tool and pop the back cover off. Starting around the triggers is usually the easiest, but make sure you have a sturdy clip because it's on there pretty good. But don't worry, the clips are sturdy and you won't break anything. The only part you need to be careful with here is a ribbon cable on the left side that you need to unplug. In case you're wondering, the signal from one side of the controller to the other is passed through the springs, and that's why this mod works so well. And don't worry about getting shocked or anything like that, it's not going to happen. Once the cover is off, you'll see the 2 stoppers that hit the end of the rails. Those are the ones that we need to remove. I used the box cutter, but in retrospect, I think some clippers would have been faster. However you choose to do this is up to you, we just need to remove those. And that's it. Once those are off, we just need to put everything back together, and don't forget we're going to need to reheat that rubber pad again so that we can put those front screws back in, but I think this is the best way so you don't damage the adhesive and everything looks put together. Once the mod is done, all you really have to do is plug it in and you're ready to go. The back springs are exposed, but this doesn't really affect anything, and you can get a 3D printed cover if it really bothers you. There's an app you can also download for some extra features like screen mapping and updates, but I didn't really use it. Basically every function can be enabled with just some key combinations, and since the G8 is recognized as a PlayStation controller, I haven't had any need for screen mapping. The build quality of the G8 feels great. It's got full-size Hall effect analog sticks that feel nice and smooth with a good grippy texture. A nice big clicky D-pad that feels awesome to use, and this is coming from someone that prefers remembering D-pads. Full-size ABXY buttons, soft click start, select, home and function buttons, soft click R1 and L1, analog L2, R2 buttons, mappable R4 and L4, pass-through charging over USB-C that I believe was updated to support 25 watts, and a fully functional headphone jack. It also has a grippy texture around the grips and triggers. It feels a lot like you're holding a regular full-size 8-bit Joe or Xbox controller. Using Hardware Tester, we can see that all of the inputs get recognized properly. The triggers are analog, the D-pad doesn't register any accidental diagonal inputs, and the sticks don't have any frustrating dead zones or drifting issues. Everything just works as it should. If there's any input lag, I haven't noticed it even when emulating retro games on RetroArch. Everything just feels snappy and responsive, and I've never felt like a miss jumped or shot was anything other than user error. This controller has some really cool features, starting with mapping the two back buttons by holding M plus R4 and R4 until the home button blinks and then pressing the button you want to map, switching the triggers from analog to hairline by holding M plus L2 and R2 for 2 seconds, turbo function by pressing M plus whatever button you want to enable turbo on, swapping ABXY by pressing M plus A for 3 seconds, adjusting volume by pressing home plus D-pad up or down, and switching modes by holding start and select. For my use, I just leave it on PS mode, and so far I haven't had any reason to change it. You also get some extra stick caps of different sizes in case you prefer having a taller stick for first-person shooters, but I just stick to the standard ones because you only get one and it feels weird having two different size sticks. This whole thing started because I wanted to try some emulation on my iPad, and I'll talk more about that here in a little bit. But I ended up spending more time playing mobile games, mainly Call of Duty, Genshin, and Diablo, because the controller just works and they look awesome on a bigger screen. If you want to play Call of Duty with this on Android, you need to use screen mapping because for some reason it just doesn't get recognized. But on iOS, the PS mode works and you can just jump right in. Playing this on a bigger screen with what's basically a full-size controller is a much better experience than what I've had every other time I've played it. Aiming and movement in general just feel better, and being able to map the sprint button to F4 is awesome. I got absolutely hooked, and even though I fell off Call of Duty a long time ago, it brought me back to spending hours playing back in the Xbox 360 days. Not to mention how good the game looks and how much you can do just playing the game without having to spend a dime on it. I've always been curious about Genshin Impact because it looks like a game I would be into. But having to use touch controls or screen mapping on Android just always felt like a compromise and just kind of turned me away. Even though some handhelds like the Odin 2 and Retro Pocket 4 Pro do a great job at it, it just never really felt seamless. Well, on iOS the game has native controller support, so I think I'm finally going to give in and spend some time playing Breath of the native Genshin Impact. I've always thought Diablo looked cool, but for some reason I never got into it. Now, thanks to Diablo Immortal, I think I get it, and after spending a few hours playing it, I'm probably going to have to pick up Diablo 4 or maybe 3, I'm not sure yet. Either way, I'm probably going to spend a few more hours playing Diablo Immortal because I'm really enjoying the experience. In general, if you like to play mobile games on your iPad or your iPhone, chances are the G8 is going to work with it, so I'm pretty sure by now you're already sold on it, but hang around because now I'm going to talk about streaming and then we're going to get into some retro gaming. First off, I don't use Game Pass, so I can't comment too much on how good the experience is, but I've seen this controller working with it. What I have been doing a lot of is local streaming using Moonlight and PS Play, and just like before, I haven't really noticed any issues other than having to switch my controller input on RPCS3. I use an 8-bit dual controller on my PC, and that gets picked up as an Xbox controller, and the G8 is still recognized as a PlayStation controller. But it's a simple fix, and everywhere else has just been plug and play. For PlayStation streaming, you could use the official app, but I found that PS Play works better and it's just a one-time $5 payment. Once I set up the connection, I was ready to play and didn't have to worry about mapping buttons or any of that. It might also look like I'm losing a lot of real estate with the big black bars on the top and bottom, but it still measures out to be a 10-inch display, and the touchscreen also works as the trackpad on the DualShock, so all the necessary functions are still there. Like I said earlier, this whole thing started because I wanted to try emulation on my iPad, and let me just say I was disappointed. Now don't get me wrong, the controller works great, RetroArch recognizes it, and it's comfortable for long play sessions. Plus, the games that do work look amazing on this screen because it has a crazy high pixel count and the aspect ratio is somewhere between 4:3 and 3:2, but emulation on iOS just isn't great. To get it to work, you need to install something called the Alt Store on both your PC and tablet. The process isn't that bad and it only takes about 20 minutes to get done. But you have to remember to reconnect your tablet every 7 days to green out the emulators, and you can only install 2 at a time. Originally, I figured I would just go with RetroArch and Dolphin since that would cover almost everything, but then I hit a wall. In order to get Dolphin and Dreamcast to work, you need to enable JIT, and the only way to do that is to connect to your PC and use the Ulster to enable it. But on iOS 17 you can't. You can only do it using a Mac, and I'm a Windows user. This led me down a rabbit hole of trying to set up a virtual machine or loading Hackintosh on a MiniPC, but it just wasn't worth it. I have a bunch of handhelds that can do this, or I can just stream from my PC, so I went with PPS's PP and RetroArch. But even that had issues. Some PSP and N64 games had rendering problems and just bad performance, and of course I still didn't have access to Dreamcast, so I focused on what did work. Old pixel-based games look amazing. Things like Super Nintendo, Game Boy Advance, arcade, and even DS games run great, and anything that uses a 4x3 screen is going to really shine, but keep in mind, you're going to be limited in what you can do. Let me know if you guys want to see a full guide on this, but for now, I'm kind of going off track since the video is supposed to be about the G8 and the iPad, so let's wrap things up. If you own an iPad or an iPhone and like playing games on them, then you should give the GameSir G8 Galileo a go. It's really changed the way I look at gaming on my iPad, and even though emulation wasn't what I had hoped, the games still look amazing, and having a physical controller makes a huge difference. Plus, the native games and streaming options makes this something really worth having. I know GameSir is working on an iOS specific version, but honestly I don't know what that could do that this doesn't already do. But let me know down in the comments what you guys think. That's gonna wrap it up for this video. I hope it was informative and that you enjoyed it. There's 3 of us on the channel, so every video is a little bit different, but we do our best to bring you quality content. If you want to check out more of my videos, we each have a playlist on the channel, and if you want to hang out with us, you can always find us on Discord, and we go live on here every Monday. If you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe. It really helps the channel grow and helps us bring you more content like this. Thanks for hanging out. I'll see you on the next one.